In this house in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn on November 20, 1932, sat a mobster called Anthony Tony the Wop Fabrizio with his typewriter, ready to blow the lid off the National Crime Syndicate.
Suddenly a knock at the door. Francis Fabrizio's father ran to the door, where stood for officers one who was small and short with a confident stance, with the next officer next to him being tall with slick-back thick hair and a menacing glare, and with baby blue eyes. Hi guys, and today I will be talking about the Fabrizio brothers who were wiped out by the Bug and Meyer mob and Murder Incorporated. They were as big as Murder Incorporated, so had to be whacked. First, I will talk about Louis Fabrizio, who was born in 1898. He ran with Little Augie Organ and Jack Legs Diamond and sold dope and opium and did hits with him, making him high up in the syndicate. He also ran with Shapiro and Lepke, where he was a hitter and hit anyone who needed to be hit. The first attempt on his life was by the men in this picture. The red arrow is from Meyer and Bugsy. Next to them is Frank Koslow and Edim Graf. On the day of May 2, 1924, on 63 Lewis Street, Louis Fabrizio and Leg Diamond went into a speakeasy to demand money, and an argument started, and shots rang out with Louis shooting the owner of the speak. However, in the shooting, Louis was shot in the cheek and in the chest. He was critical, but survived. On May 2022, Bugsy and Meyer loaded up with the Amberg brothers and jumped into a cab and said to the driver, "Take me to 2nd Street Avenue B and step on it, punk." As before, Diamond was with Louis, and they went to a cafe to get some grub and returned to a car with a flat tire. Louis started to change his tire as he kneeled over to do so. A cab was speeding down the road, and 4 men jumped out and pumped shots into both Diamond and Louis. Louis died on the spot, and Diamond managed to run into a side entrance. The first Fabrizio brother is gone. Next was Andrew Fabrizio murder by the hands of Bugsy and Murder Incorporated. These guys was really busy in the 20s hitting anyone. Crazy bastards, but that's why they call him Bugsy. Andrew Fabrizio was the youngest, born in 1907. He was around Bugsy's age and higher up because of his brothers. He started his criminal career running with the Buckhouse and Shapiro mob. He started with burning down street vendors with Bugsy and Buckhouse, but moved on to blasting people's faces up with them. In 1928, which was the year of his brother Louis' murder, he knocked heads with the Bug and Meyer mob and Buckhouse. He started running a dope pipeline with Tony and Vincent Baca. He ran dope with them, but from time to time dealt with Bugsy. That was stupid because Bugsy would whack you for looking at him weird back then. It worked though, and he made it past the Castellammarise War and was prospering until the fateful night of August 10, 1932, where Andrew was called by Bugsy and Buckhouse along with the Amberg brothers. They said there is a party with many ladies of the night present and explained how Andrew and Vincent Baca should come. You see, Tony had been missing since last night, and his wife was unaware of his whereabouts. It is said he was chopped to pieces and dumped on the Newark beach the next day by the Amberg brothers. Vincent and Andrew dressed in matching suits all the day down to the undergarments. They wore bright blue suits and dressed to the max. They entered the garage of the Bug and Meyer mob and noticed 4 men. One was Benny Siegel, the other was Whitey Krakauer, the other was Gora Shapiro, and the other was Bo Weinberg. The next day, Andrew and Vincent were found tied up in a sack with their face chopped at. And like that, another Fabrizio down. Next, and the most powerful Fabrizio brother, is Tony the Wop alias Francis the Wop. He started his career in 1907, with him being pinched for a home invasion along with Charles Carbisi. For this, he received 2 years in the big house. In 1909, he was pinched for assault after he was found throwing a knife by officers. I'm starting to think this guy was real Bugsy with his attempts at organized crime. In the middle to late 1910s, Francis was involved in the Bearcat and Ciccarelli War. He was playing a major role in the war, and his name suggests he was with Ciccarelli. On the fateful night of January 9, 1913, Bearcat drank in the Unity Club with his mob, where he received a phone call and walked on over to the booth. All of a sudden, a flurry of bullets sprayed Bearcat's body. In the same year, Ciccarelli was shot, and on May 2 of the same year, our protagonist Francis was shot and survived. In the 1920s, Francis was with the Frankie Yale mob. He ran beer and dope with his mob and met Alphonse Capone.
They were places that were patronized by the finest people and had seating capacity, some of them as high as 800 people. And some of the finest people of the United States patronized these places. Also, your big charity balls were held there. And usually every year, the proms from that area were held there. Their fathers and mothers. There were not any nukes in some corner or somewhere. They were known all over America for their food and entertainment.
Meyer Lansky was always a tactician, and he orchestrated the hits on the Fabrizios, and one was left, and he sat in his rat-hole garage with Bugsy and his mob and came up with an idea that Bugsy should suddenly fall ill and check himself into a hospital. He then orders Big Greenie Greenberg to go and get the guns for the hit. Whilst all this, Francis is in his parents' home writing a canary book about the underworld and his time running with the Lep mob and running with Bearcat and Ciccarelli. He was ready to blow the lid of organized crime in the 10s and 20s. Bugsy sat in the hospital talking to a pretty nurse and the stage was set. On 8 p.m. on 140 for Parkway, Francis, the WAP, made the wise decision to hide out in his parents' house. He sat with his lawyer and a typewriter and wrote away. His book said, and I quote, "I was bigger than Al Capone, and our underworld has its Underworld for 100 Club." He also wrote, in order to achieve power, you have to first have power, then second, have wealth, then third, have political power, then fourth, have good deals. As he was writing this, Bugsy, Meyer, Lepke, Shapiro, Diamond, and the Ambergs got ready with their revolvers. They got into 2 blue sedans and paced through the streets of Williamsburg. As they paced through, Bugsy joked about how this last Fabrizio was harder to kill than his dope brothers. You see, Bugsy had just leapt out of a hospital window and ran to his and Meyer's garage. They RV'd at the house in 140 for Parkway, where they heard his family celebrating and could see them drinking and laughing. Bugsy snarled and jumped out first, but was held back by Lepke and Meyer. All off a sudden, Meyer Lansky pulled out officer uniforms for himself, Benny Shapiro, and Pretty Amberg. They wore them and walked over to the door and knocked on the door. Inside, Francis' father ran in excitement, maybe thinking it was the FBI taking them to safety. He opened up and Benny Blue Eyes said, "We are here for Francis, got a few questions for the young tough." His father shouted his name and said, "Come here, the FBI is here." Francis was drunk and came to the door and answered questions, which shocked Benny. Meyer asked questions as a joke. Benny became enraged at how long it was taking and pumped for shots into Francis and left him on the street. The WAP was dead and Benny Meyer and the gang sped off into the night and the story of the Fabrizio brothers was over. Benny returned to the hospital. The guns were located and no prints were on them. Benny and Meyer lived another day and the Fabrizio triplets died, showing the power of the Bug and Meyer mob. Make sure you like and subscribe or the boss is going to have to clean house and whack you.